for children. We are moving toward the international and global expansion. We want to raise awareness in the world that water shortages will come, and we have to be careful. We have to take action together. So we want to lead this initiative.
I'm David McKenzie in Cape Town, and this is CNN.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello and welcome to our viewers in the U.S. and around the world. I'm Allison Kosick in New York. Ukrainian forces are rapidly building on their recent battlefield successes as more Russian troops pull out of northern Ukraine. Ukraine's deputy defense minister on Saturday declared the Kyiv region liberated. An advisor to President Zelensky said another 30 settlements are back under Ukrainian control. A warning now, these next images are graphic. The true horror of the Russian invasion is on full display in the town of Bucha, a northern suburb of Kyiv. Journalists report at least 20 men dead in the streets. All were wearing civilian clothes. U.S. intelligence now suggests Moscow has set a goal of controlling the eastern region of Donbass by early May. Some officials believe President Vladimir Putin needs to show some sort of military victory in Ukraine by May 9th. That's when the Soviet defeat of the Nazis is celebrated each year in Moscow with a military parade in Red Square. Ukraine is asking for heavier weapons in anticipation of a renewed Russian offensive in the east. A source tells CNN the U.S. is expected to help send Soviet-era tanks from NATO partners, possibly within days. And here's how Ukrainian protesters were dealt with Saturday in a Russian-controlled town in central Ukraine. With gunfire and loud explosions, at least 4 people were reported hurt. The capital has been quieter than normal since the Russians began withdrawing, but gruesome scenes and destruction litter the landscape everywhere the Russians have been. CNN's Fred Pleitgen has the latest from Kyiv. And a warning here, some of the images are disturbing.
Well, it's certainly gotten a lot quieter here in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv. You know, we have air raid sirens a couple of times during the day, but by and large, it certainly is a lot less than what we've been seeing this past week and even the past couple of days. And the Ukrainians are essentially saying that the Russians are leaving the districts around Kyiv, are retreating. The Russians, of course, claim that this was always part of their plan and that they're just pulling back right now. What we're seeing now as the Russians are moving out is that they certainly have taken some serious losses. You know, I was out in some of these districts around Kyiv, and we saw a lot of tank carcasses, destroyed armored vehicles, and then just also positions that were abandoned by the Russians as they moved out of here. The other thing, unfortunately, that we're also finding is that there are still a lot of dead bodies that have yet to be recovered. In fact, there was some video that came out of a district called Bucha, which is just to the northwest of Kyiv, where the streets just seem to be lined with corpses. The Ukrainians now say they're obviously going to try and bring some of them away and clean that whole area up. The Ukrainians, for their part, are saying that this is definitely not the end. They say they believe that the Russian forces were beaten as they tried to invade the capital Kyiv and are now essentially trying to regroup. In fact, Ukrainian officials say they believe that attacks will intensify, especially in the southeast of the country, and it's certainly something that they're bracing for.
Okay, and our thanks to Fred Pleitgen for that report. Let's bring in CNN military analyst and former NATO Supreme Allied Commander, retired General Wesley Clark. General, thanks so much for your time today. You know, Ukraine is claiming full control of Kyiv with its deputy defense minister declaring the region liberated. But do you actually think Russian troops are going to regroup for a later attack on the capital city?
Yes, I think, I think it's great tactical success on the part of the Ukrainians. They've driven the Russians back. But this is so far from over that got to be very, very careful not to raise expectations. What has to happen now is lots more support has to come in to help Ukraine to drive the Russians out, to drive them out in the south, and to strengthen the Ukrainian force in the Donbass area. Now, what's going to happen is, as you can see from the map, the Russians are north and south of Dnipro. Dnipro is going to be the next key objective. If they can drive to Dnipro, they'll cut off the Ukrainian forces that are holding back the separatists in the Donbass. And this is the next Russian objective, is to do an envelopment of these forces, cut them off, annihilate them. That's a substantial part of Ukraine's army. In order to prevent that, they've got to have heavy fighting equipment, not javelins, not stingers. That's fine for helping defend cities. They need tanks. They need mobile artillery. They need lots of ammunition. They need fuel. They need repairs. We don't have that for them. It's got to come from our NATO allies in Eastern Europe, and they've got to get it there and get it there quickly.
So the Ukrainians clearly have to prepare for what's coming next. I'm curious, as we are, watching this from the sidelines, many of us 30 days into this conflict, what else are you hearing in military circles about the campaign?
Well, what we're hearing is, of course, the Ukrainians can really fight. They want to win this fight. They don't want to hold, they want to push the Russians out. And here's the thing, that for campaign after campaign in the last 50 years, 70 years, the United States tried to help countries defend themselves who weren't that prepared to fight. Now we've got a first world country. Their soldiers have education just as good as ours. They're just as good technically as we are. We give them our modern weapons, they can use them in 24 hours. Plus, they know how to fight on that terrain. So we're going to have to do a better job of listening to the Ukrainians and what they need and get them the equipment they say they need. And by the way, not only do they need tanks and artillery, they need aircraft. They need air cover for those forces. So somehow we've got to go back and revisit those issues and get them the aircraft they need. They need air support, and they can fly it, but they've got to have the aircraft.
General, what should we be reading into U.S. intelligence that's telling us that Russia is shifting its focus to having this victory in early May? If Russia takes control of parts of Ukraine, would Putin just stop there? Wouldn't he want more?
Oh, the goal's not any different. He published what he wanted back in December. He wants Ukraine. He wants the Baltic states. He wants control over Eastern Europe. He wants to shatter NATO, and he wants the United States out. This is for all the marbles. All he's trying to do right now is stall. He'd like to stall Western reinforcement of Ukraine. He'd like to have us emotionally, morally disarmed to think that's all he wants, but it isn't. So he wants to disrupt the international system. And with him is China in this. China's on the sidelines, maybe, but rooting for him. China's looking at Taiwan. China wants to assert itself. So China and Russia have teamed up on this. Ukraine is just the current battlefield. But if the Ukrainians defeat Russia on this battlefield, everything changes. So the best way to protect NATO, the best way to protect the international system, is to give Ukraine the assistance it says it needs and let them handle Russia on this battlefield.
General, do you believe negotiations between Russia and Ukraine will wind up ending? Will it be negotiations that end this war, or will it be decided on the battlefield?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, whatever shape these negotiations ultimately take is going to depend on what happens on the battlefield. But, it's in the interest of both Russia and Ukraine to keep these negotiations going, looking for an opening for the Russians, forestalling Western assistance to Ukraine, raising hopes, dashing hopes, finding information, intimidating the Ukrainians. And at the same time, President Zelensky knows he has to be a willing participant in this because the European allies expect it to. I mean, Germany, Italy, France, they just want it over. They're very short-sighted on this. They don't understand fully what's really at stake. They want to go back to business as usual in Europe, I guess. But they've got to understand that there is no more business as usual. These sanctions are for real. They've got to be kept on Russia. And the only way through this is to support Ukraine wholeheartedly and let them handle Russia militarily on the ground. So the ideal negotiation outcome is Russia says, please let me bring all of my troops out of Ukraine safely. You can have your country. That's the outcome the international community should be working for.
All right, General Wesley Clark, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Ukraine says more than 4,000 people were evacuated through humanitarian corridors on Saturday. But with Russian attacks making it hard to keep the corridors open, some refugees are finding their way to safety through more unconventional methods. CNN's Ben Weidman has that.
Everything will be all right, he sings, for every one of us. Words of comfort for those desperately in need. Popular singer and former lawmaker Sviatoslav Vakarchuk goes from village to village with a simple message.
Smile.
This church in the village of Bashtanka is now home, temporary home, for those who have managed to flee Russian-occupied territory. Volunteering in the kitchen, Svetlana Lyashuk finds peace, but not peace of mind. It's really hard, says Svetlana. People here are very nice, but I just want to go home. Vitaly Butochel, a mechanic in peacetime, now runs a complex operation feeding and housing the displaced.
This all make us like a family, very closely.
The church feels like an oasis of the ordinary, far from the madness outside. Early evening and a bus approaches, marked Deti, Russian for children. Alas, no guarantee of safety. It's coming from the town of Snihorivka, under Russian control. But it didn't pass through a humanitarian corridor negotiated by the Red Cross. The arrangement whereby these people are able to get out of the Russian-occupied areas to here is very simple. Men on the bus give Russian soldiers food and cigarettes, and the Russian soldiers let them pass. Larisa Shevchenko made it out, but remains tormented by fear for those who couldn't get away. Everything is really bad, she says. Her parents in Snihorivka are still hiding out in the basement. She hopes they'll get out tomorrow. Ben Weidman, CNN, Bashtanka, southern Ukraine.
A Ukrainian lawmaker says military resistance is not the only way to push back against Russia. Another one is carrying on with normal life as much as possible, but with a gun. Parliament member Lysia Vasilenko spoke with CNN's chief international anchor, Christiana Amanpour, and told her what the stakes are for the Ukrainian people.
We are doing this for our very survival, and when the survival instinct kicks in, people can do amazing things. People become superheroes, and this is what you're witnessing in Ukraine. And at the end of the day, I hope that the West will wake up and get their rose-colored glasses off and actually start doing something here on the ground.
You think they still have rose-colored glasses on?
I do.
About?
I do. About the fact that we can solve this in a diplomatic way, and that Putin will back off, and that reason can be found behind all of this. Well, no. Putin's aggression is of such a level that it can only be hit back by force, and a force bigger than its own. Ukraine is doing fine with all the weapons coming in from the West, but eventually, if we are to get rid of it once and for all, and to make our world a safer place for everyone, and send a strong message to dictators out there as well, then we must unite efforts, and the international community must be here on the ground pushing back with us on this aggression.
Lesia, when we spoke in the first week of the war before I got here, you said, I've got my machine gun, and you've tweeted that I've also got my manicures.
Yes.
Your resistance takes many, many forms. And you're actually carrying your pistol right now.
I am. I do have my PM with me, and I carry it actually with me all the time. It's become my best friend.
And as we speak, we can hear the multiple anti-aircraft or anti-missile batteries going out.
Yeah, but to be honest, it's yes, it's small, it's compact, it's comfortable. You can carry it in a sort of backpack or a bag. Also, when I had a big puffy coat, I used to carry it with me like
And
this.
did you ever imagine in your life that as an MP in 2022 in Ukraine, you'd be forced to carry a gun around?
No, never, never. I'm actually very much anti-gun.
The lawmaker also said maintaining as normal life as possible is a form of resistance. She says it sends a message that people are human and life is worth living. Coming up, weary Ukrainians struggle to get out of war-ravaged areas and hope that an end to the fighting is near. Just ahead, I'll ask a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine if this war could be resolved and how.
Shahira Yahya is the co-founder of Chitosan Egypt, a biotech startup that creates what they say are fully organic farming products from shrimp shells. Every year, Egypt discards thousands of tons of shrimp waste, an abundant resource that holds the key ingredient for Shahira's products, chitosan.
Chitosan isn't a new concept at all. It's been around since the 1800s. You can find it on land through insects, in the sea in the form of lobsters and shrimps.
Chitosan Egypt breaks away minerals from shells to extract the chitosan, then dries and grinds it, turning it into an organic product to be used for farming, replacing man-made synthetic fertilizers that can be harmful to the environment.
Chitosan fertilizers and pesticides target over 70 pests in 25 strategic crops.
The agriculture sector is Egypt's second largest source of revenue, accounting for more than 11% of the country's economy. Shahira has a mission to not only make the sector more organic, but affordable for farmers.
We empower farmers to grow cleaner agriculture, and we are 20% cheaper than competitors.
A greener product that promises a cleaner and more profitable future for Egypt's farmers.
All new African Voices Changemakers. Create opportunities. Impact communities. Transform lives. Two artists draw inspiration from their communities and their surroundings.
My production or my process has created a value chain within the community. It has created jobs.
African Voices Changemakers, only on CNN, in association with Glow.
World's biggest business stories in one place. Expert analysis from every corner of the globe. Marketplace, Africa, Asia, Europe, and Middle East. With CNNBusiness.com.
Once in a generation opportunity.
Technology, innovation, business.
Even as Russia pulls back in some parts of the country and groups are still struggling to get Ukrainians out of harm's way, the International Committee for the Red Cross has managed to get into the battered city of Irpin in recent days, treating the injured, delivering food, and hoping to return next week with more essential supplies. The aid group tried but was unable to reach Mariupol on Saturday after arrangements and conditions made it impossible to proceed. Some 100,000 residents remain trapped there. According to the UN, more than 4.1 million refugees have fled Ukraine since the fighting started. Joining me now is Stephen Pifer. He's a research fellow at Stanford University and a former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. Thanks so much for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Well, how do you see the war in Ukraine playing out? If this is, how is this going to be resolved? Is it resolved through negotiations, or is this something that's going to be happening on the battlefield in kind of diplomacy by force?
Well, there is a negotiation to be had. I believe that President Zelensky is prepared for a serious negotiation. Unfortunately, however, there is no sign yet that Moscow is prepared seriously to engage in negotiations. And so I think that means for the time being that the fighting is going to continue. And it would be useful for the West to continue the flow of weapons to Ukraine to better enable the Ukrainians to defend themselves. And at some point, perhaps force the Kremlin to conclude that it cannot achieve its goals on the battlefield and that it needs to negotiate. But unfortunately, we're not yet at that point.
Do you see Russia ever getting to that point, and how much can Putin really be trusted?
Well, I think there is some point where simply the accumulation of both losses of Russian soldiers, bear in mind that the estimate is now as many as 10,000 Russian soldiers have been killed in action in Ukraine in just 5 weeks. And they've lost an incredible amount of material, tanks, aircraft, armored personnel carriers. At some point, presumably, it becomes too painful, and the Kremlin will look to negotiate. And that's why it's important that the West continue to provide arms to the Ukrainians so they can reach that point. Now, any negotiation, once you get to it, is going to be very difficult. There are some hard questions there, but it's pretty clear that President Zelensky on the Ukrainian side is prepared for a serious give and take negotiation. The question is, when will Moscow reach that point?
If true peace talks between Russia and Ukraine actually unfold, one possibility on the table is that Ukraine becomes a neutral state. First, explain to us what that exactly means, and is that a good idea? And would that really ensure peace in the region?
Yeah, well, the Russians, one of their demands is that Ukraine be neutral. And President Zelensky has said he's prepared to move away from Ukraine's ambition to join NATO. Ukrainian negotiators last week said that they were prepared to accept neutrality. That would be non-bloc status for Ukraine. They would agree that there would be no foreign military bases on Ukrainian territory, and they would agree that Ukraine would not develop nuclear or other weapons of mass destruction. However, Ukraine has said that for that kind of neutral Ukraine, they would want firm security guarantees that there would not be a future invasion. And that's where it gets a little bit difficult, because some Ukrainians have suggested that what they're looking for is something like the Article 5 security guarantee in the NATO treaty. That's the article that says an attack against one will be considered an attack against all. And at this point, I'm not sure if there are many countries that would be prepared to commit to Ukraine, that they would be prepared to give Ukraine a guarantee that they would come to its aid with their military forces were Russia to invade at some future point. To my mind, the best security guarantee actually, though, would be to help Ukraine acquire and maintain the military with sufficient weapons that they could either defeat another Russian invasion or, better yet, make it appear to the Russians that no invasion would make sense in the first place because the cost would be so high.
Do you think sanctions at this point are having any impact on Russia? You know, we're seeing its economy certainly go through devastation right now, but is it having any impact, do you think, in what's happening on the battlefield?
Yeah, I think the sanctions are definitely having an impact on the Russian economy. There's already been, the last 6 weeks, been an acceleration in inflation. Russia's headed for double-digit inflation in the coming months. There are projections, for example, by the International Financial Institute, that the Russian economy will contract by 15% this year. That's more than the American economy contracted during the Great Depression. So there are going to be severe impacts on the economy. The problem is that those impacts are coming in the months to follow, and they may not be applying enough immediate pressure to cause the Kremlin to change its course. Now, there are certainly people, the head of the Russian Central Bank, the Russian Minister of Finance, who understand just how much damage is going to be doing to the Russian economy as these sanctions take hold. But it's not clear that Mr. Putin, in that very close circle in which he operates, are these people having a chance to talk to him and explain to him just what's coming down the road for the economy.
Okay, Stephen Pifer, thanks so much for your perspective.
Thank you.
I'll look now at some other stories we're following around the world. Voters in Hungary will head to the polls in the coming hours. Prime Minister Viktor Orban faces a rare challenge from a united coalition of opposition parties. He has faced international criticism over Hungary's backslide and democratic standards. And Mr. Orban's close ties to Russian President Vladimir Putin have come under renewed scrutiny. Leading the united opposition is Peter Markizai, a small town mayor who has painted Mr. Orban as a budding authoritarian following Putin's model. And in just a few hours, Pakistan's parliament is set to hold a vote of no confidence in Prime Minister Imran Khan. Mr. Khan said in a televised address he would not resign ahead of the vote, and he accused the opposition of toppling a government and being under foreign influence. Last week, he lost the majority in parliament. And current predictions place the number of no confidence votes at 177. That's just 5 votes over the threshold to remove a prime minister. Sri Lanka's government is imposing a weekend curfew as unrest grows over a struggling economy. People are crowding stores to buy food and other essentials after the president declared a state of emergency. This as a foreign exchange crisis batters the local currency. Now protesters are taking aim at the curfew itself.
Having curfew is not going to help anybody. People have to run businesses. People have to, these tuk drivers, they need to live there. They live on a daily wage. They need to run their tuks. They need to go like every single day. People are going to suffer if this is going to be a continuous thing.
The government says it's seeking help from the International Monetary Fund and loans from India and China. I'm Alison Kosick. For our international viewers, Marketplace Africa is next. For viewers in North America, our coverage continues in just a moment.
Hosting a global event like the FIFA World Cup 2022 in Qatar is a complex logistical challenge. GWC are proud to be its official logistics provider. No matter the industry sector, logistical challenge, or security need, GWC deliver the complete end-to-end logistics service, backed up by more than 3 million square meters of supply chain infrastructure. GWC, delivering logistics innovation.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
When you travel the world, make sure the world travels with you. Check in, log on, and get connected with all of the latest developments at your fingertips. CNN Partner Hotels, connected to your world.
There were 3 strikes that hit this facility.
This is as close as you're going to get.
Just look at the utter destruction caused by this massive explosion.
Imagine the good fortune of the truck driver. He managed to survive.
More than a month into the war here in Ukraine, and the refugee crisis continues.
It is not even remotely close to being a ceasefire.
In Kiev, Kherson,
Zaporizhia,
Lviv, this is CNN.
I'm David Culver in Beijing, and this is CNN.
The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise. With substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity, Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
Hello, and welcome to Marketplace Africa, where we cover the biggest economic trends impacting the continent. I'm Larry Madowo in Nairobi. As Uganda's population continues to grow in major cities like Kampala, access to affordable housing has become a topic of discussion. For some entrepreneurs, building the foundation to provide housing to keep up with that growing demand has become their main business. Take a look. Kampala's bustling city streets are a sign of a growing middle class and a potential economic boom in East Africa. But there's more to this traffic than meets the eye. Housing is becoming a huge issue in Uganda.
And the trend is such that currently we have a housing deficit, which is slightly over 2 million, around 2.2 million housing units.
According to the World Bank, almost 25% of Uganda's population lives in urban areas, and at the current migration rate, urban dwellers will surpass rural populations by 2060. The private and public sectors are tackling this housing demand since the influx of people moving from rural to urban areas has highlighted the need for more developed housing in Kampala.
Government provides housing for specific key sectors like in the health, the education system, in the police, and in the military, but the residential housing is mainly private-led. So we are working with the private sector. In and around Kampala, there are very many key players in the real estate sector who are providing this.
One of those players is Fakhruddin Properties, selling close to 2,000 apartments to date. They started building affordable units in 2016. Now, 5 years into the Ugandan real estate housing market, the company is reckoning with this crisis, one structure at a time.
They all come to Kampala to study in a university and a college. And then when they graduate, they want to settle down in Kampala. That was the main thing which led us into affordable housing. We saw that there is a gap in the affordable housing. There's a deficit. And then we started creating awareness.
This awareness has been moving middle-class Ugandans from a renting mentality to becoming homeowners.
Right now we have a 2-bedroom apartment in Chira with a swimming pool, a fitness gym, kids play area indoor, and it goes for 170 million shillings, which is 35,000 pounds, which is approximately $42,000, with a payment plan, an extensive payment plan of 24 months.
For many potential customers, affordability is one of the biggest priorities.
So what motivated me was not only the location, the structure, the design of the flat. Their rooms are really quite large. And another thing that also motivated me was the flexible payment plan, because one thing I was worried, can I afford it?
Owning right from the get-go could be difficult for most, leaving rent as the only option. Smart Havens Africa, a small female-led enterprise, is building affordable and sustainable houses to provide a rent-to-own path towards home ownership.
We started Smart Havens Africa, where they can ably pay per month and later own these homes for a period of 5 to 8 years without further deepening their poverty. So we believe this rent-to-own plan is helping people get out of the rental poverty trap and later become independent homeowners.
Uganda's capital is the 3rd fastest growing city in the world, with its population set to double by 2035, according to the World Economic Forum. With more people moving in, combining affordability with sustainability is also a priority for Smart Havens Africa.
We are pressing locally on-site available materials and optimal moisture condition to create an interlocking brick that is helping us fight against the traditional building methods, enabling families pay a range of 560,000 Ugandan shillings on average for a 2-bedroom house. And all this is providing people a stable, comfortable environment where they can live in and secure themselves a better future.
Now, at least I know that there's an amount I pay on a monthly basis. I know at the end of a certain period, I'll be having my own home and I'll be happy.
Whether renting or owning, Uganda's housing market is slowly but surely providing options to a growing population.
There will be a massive demand of housing in both, in the high-end sector and the affordable housing sector. So the trend right now with what we are going through, affordable housing is a blockbuster.
Up next, how a firm working on investments all across the continent hopes to help drive business growth.
Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
You can help the refugees from Ukraine. Join the over 70,000 who've already raised millions for food, shelter, and more. Explore cnn.com/impact. Click to take action.
Our mission here at CNN, the news comes first. More breaking news that we are following right now. Welcome to the Situation Room. We have breaking news.
The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise. Since 1978, we've touched the lives of millions of people by meeting their basic needs. Our belief in the promise of Africa has taken us into 14 African countries, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity, promising jobs, improved standards of living, and economic growth. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
Welcome back. For the consulting group Dalberg Advisors, collaboration between the public and private sectors plays a key role in the success of their firm. We spoke to Nayoko Koyama about the sectors she sees ripe for growth and the investments needed to drive future success on the continent.
My name is Naoko Koyama. I am a partner at Dalberg Advisors.
Dalberg is a very specialized firm with a huge focus on social impact. How did you get here? How did it start?
So Dalberg, as you say, we are an impact advisory group that brings together expertise across strategy consulting, design thinking, research, and implementation to address the complex social and environmental challenges. And we work collaboratively with communities, corporations, government, investors, and institutions to drive a sustainable impact at scale. And you ask how we got here. In Africa, we felt that we really need to be rooted on the country context. We need to be close to the stakeholders, actors who can make an action to drive the impact. And hence we expanded to 11 countries, and we have operated in almost all countries on the continent.
Talk to me about some of the challenges you face operating on the continent.
We face the challenges, but we see turning challenges into opportunity is something we do really well. When we think about how we started in Africa with that advisory services, and now we offer not just strategy consulting, but also design, research, location analytics, and implementation. This is because we saw a challenge and a gap. We have developed what we call a DIT. D, design, I, incubate, and a T, transfer. We might think that this is the surgeons are missing. To run a safe surgery is not just about the surgeon, it's the equipment as well as the basic health workers who understand the hygiene of the surgery. And we looked at the ecosystem and we designed using our strategy advisory capability. But when we had a concept, we needed somebody to implement. And so we brought our implementation team to act as the project management office to operate that in a couple of countries in Africa. So that's an example of a DIT.
Let's talk about the power of parity, because there must be so much potential to be unlocked by investing in women and girls.
So at Dalberg, we bring a gender lens to portfolio work in all sectors that we do. By that, what I mean is that we bring the gender dimension to any problem or opportunities that we are analyzing through to the solutions that we provide. Another example I would like to introduce is in working with the private foundation, trying to understand how we can increase the production of the pharmaceutical product in Ghana. By doing so, we recognize that our interview respondents in the pharmaceutical sector, manufacturer, didn't have any female respondent. It was all male. Female tends to shy away from manufacturing because it's a men's sector. So based on these findings, we are able to recommend that by supporting a female skilled workers and students to not just to study the medicine, but also business skill and getting into the manufacturing sector, we can address gender gap as well as we can address more production of the pharmaceutical product at the same time.
Looking at the broad spectrum of areas that you work in, how often is technology and digitization part of a project?
Technology and the digital tools and the data are definitely bringing a cross-cutting innovation to everything we do. Anything from a healthcare sector, education, jobs, in agriculture even, and the climate change.
Let's look to the future. Where do you see the company in 5 to 10 years? What sort of impact do you hope to achieve?
We continue to be committed to a long-term development, long-term growth of Africa. We hope to be present in more countries because we value our understanding of a local context. However, our mission continues to be the same, making sure that we build a world where all people everywhere can achieve their full potential.
And that does it for us here on Marketplace Africa. Remember to head to our website for the latest stories and keep up with us on social media. I'm Larry Midowo in Nairobi, and I'll see you next time in the Marketplace.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
When you invest in people, you give them the opportunity to be more. With up to 20 million young people joining the African workforce each year, empowering the next generation has never been more important. Access Bank's Project LEAD has equipped over 90,000 students with leadership training. And our Pitchathon scheme invests in female entrepreneurs, helping them realize their vision. access. More than banking.
The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
Hello and welcome to Marketplace Africa, where we cover the biggest economic trends impacting the continent. I'm Larry Midowo in Nairobi. While aquaculture production has more than doubled over the past decade all across sub-Saharan Africa, one country has taken the crown when it comes to producing tilapia first: Ghana. Watch. Catfish and tilapia are the main catch in Ghana, but due to overfishing and climate change, they're not mainly found in the lakes anymore.
The pressure on the climate, the climatic changes and stuff, it's not possible to depend on nature anymore, on the volume and quantities of fish that we demand as the population is growing. So we only are left with only one choice than to produce in a very responsible manner.
Aquaculture in Ghana, from the backyard ponds to large-scale fish farms, is keeping these local jobs and businesses above water.
Fishing is like hunting, and fish farming is like animal husbandry. Ghana has a really good climate for aquaculture. The temperatures are relatively stable year-round. Yes, it seems to be getting warmer, but they're not in as big of a problem area temperature-wise as parts of Southeast Asia is. The markets are good. It's really better to sell to the local market than to try to sell on the international export market. You can get better prices here.
Tilapia production at Flossel Farms has been booming over the last 6 years.
We were doing something like 70,000 fingerlings every month when we started. And we produce today about 24 million fingerlings every year, with about 1,200 table size tons of tilapia on annual basis.
Flossel Farms hopes that by farming fish, it will make the protein more affordable, especially because fish makes up about 60% of the annual protein consumed by Ghanaians, according to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN.
Ghanaians are very passionate about what they eat. The population is moving so fast. So we pray that if the industry is growing, we should be able to up our game and be able to contribute more than we have done now. Maybe attract the right partners or the right investors so that we can competitively put a fish on the plate of everybody who wants it.
But tilapia farming has come with some challenges. 2018's disease outbreak in Lake Volta, where Flossel Farms operates, has led to a decrease in tilapia production. As a countermeasure, Ghana's government placed a 6-month ban on tilapia imports in 2018, hoping to slow the spread of the disease. For Viverica, more and more small-scale backyard fish farms have popped up to meet the demand.
You need large-scale farms to create that critical mass, medium-scale farms that local investors can do on their own and not get in a lot of outside money, and then some small-scale farms to allow people to be able to make a decent income for themselves.
One hobby fisherman turned his passion for fish farming into a business by tapping into the cooked catfish markets.
If I want to make more money, I move away from selling a lot of fresh fish, because initially I realized that if I am to grill, I'm going to get more money. So then most of the focus goes to the grilling and then the smoking.
According to FAO, pond-based farms are the most popular type of fishery in Accra, and 10% of Ghana's population is dependent on the fishing sector for their livelihood. For Latte, maintaining a small-scale farm is not an easy task.
You are in a space where business is growing, and then sometimes you want to be able to meet a demand. And so these things becomes the challenges that sometimes we do face. The price of the feed keeps on skyrocketing every single time.
But fish farmers are taking cues from the existing aquaculture industry that has been practiced for centuries across Asia. According to the FAO, global aquaculture production could reach 109 million tons by 2030, an increase of more than 30% from 2018. With a 30% consumption uptick in sub-Saharan Africa by the end of the decade, aquaculture could be a big opportunity for small fisheries in Ghana.
If you look at the rate at which aquaculture is developing around Africa now, it's a lot faster rate than any part of the world. So many parts of the world, Europe, US and stuff, they did a good job from the beginning, but they are stuff. If we are able to up our game in terms of performance, in terms of productivity, we're going to take that space for sure.
Coming up next, we'll look at a company banking on new investments across Africa.
Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
Today, Russia's Ukraine invasion and a strongman's grip on power. A former oligarch gives Fareed his take on the sentiment in Russia. Could this unprovoked war be Putin's downfall? Fareed Zakaria, GPS. Today. Coronavirus. To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus. Fact versus fiction.
The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise. Since 1978, we've touched the lives of millions of people by meeting their basic needs. Our belief in the promise of Africa has taken us into 14 African countries, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity, promising jobs, improved standards of living, and economic growth. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
Welcome back. Despite the pandemic, DG Invest says they've hit record highs when it comes to investments on the continent. Nina Dos Santos caught up with the company's CEO, Roland Siller, to talk about how backing innovation and renewable energy investments will transform business in Africa.
If we would have real commitments from the industrialized world to go on net zero faster than we talk of today, to have concrete action planned, to have finance put on the table, we need to have a commitment from all partners. Hello, my name is Roland Siller. I'm the CEO of DG, the German Development Finance Institution.
How much of a priority is Africa, and which countries in particular are you focusing heavily on with your investments?
If you look at our portfolio, it's roughly around a third of what we do as we acting globally. So around 2.2 billion out of our 8 billion portfolio. And if we look at the whole KfW group, we are part of KfW Group, which is the third biggest bank in Germany with 500 billion in assets. Africa is increasing every year. Last year in the pandemic, we did a record high 400 million to support our African partner companies and to bring in new investments also from Europe and Germany. It's really, first of all, the entrepreneurs. We're looking for good entrepreneurs who want to make a change, who want to create decent jobs, who want to have an impact on climate. We look into companies who want to transform their business to be more resilient.
Were there any turning points for your company that you can pinpoint to that have helped you on the journey that you're on today? Because obviously impact investing 10 years ago wasn't really a theme that people discussed around the boardroom table.
Yeah, if you like, let me put it this way. The foundation of this bank 60 years ago was to create decent jobs and opportunities through private sector investment in developing countries. Now we understand that financial part is one, because there's a lot of money around. There's a lot of capital looking for good investments. But the differentiator is, how can you find good projects? How can you identify good entrepreneurs? You need eyes on the ground, good standards, know-how, and also instruments to show that it has a real impact. Because as an investor, you don't know, you want to have a proof. And we found out that for us, this is a factor of competitive advantage and a chance to mobilize real private sector funding for good.
I want to ask you about your Africa Connect plan. How is this likely to actually make an impact in terms of driving innovation across the continent?
The basic idea was we have a lot of very innovative